Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bible Talk Live. I'm Bill Rhodes.
I'm Brian Carey.
And this is Doug McKinney.
Good to see you guys again. We're all three here again. That's always good news, right?
Yes, it is.
And so we are we're coming together. We're going to talk about the church. We're going to talk about the Bible, and have another good discussion.
Yeah, I felt like, and maybe you guys agree or disagree, I'm not sure, but I felt like last time we didn't talk enough about the real reason for the church, the real reason that we gather together as God's people. I really feel like, Brian, and I'll let you chime in first on this, I really feel like that going to church, if we can say it that way, to the gathering of God's people has become less and less important to people.
I think that for people in church, it might be more important because as we see our society kind of decaying, maybe that's the wrong word, it's being disassembled and taken apart right in front of our eyes. But for the people who are outside of a church group already, I think they just see less and less value in it. I think that there's like this is just some anachronism, some holdover. Like we have science now. We don't really need you guys. What are you doing? And they just don't really see any value, like we saw in previous generations, let alone previous decade. Like this is kind of a new thing. And I quote Jordan Peterson and give credit where credit is due. He said Americans are fat and lazy and stupid. And this is a new thing. It didn't used to be like that. Something has changed. and that's true. And I think this is part of it, is our motivation, our devotion to God is not what it used to be. And it's reflecting in our nation.
Well, one of the things that I see, and Bill, this is pretty much across the board, is that we're not seeing the church growing in numbers. What we're seeing is that people are going from church to church. They're church shopping, church hopping from time to time. But we're not necessarily seeing a movement of church growth. There's no real revival. There's no idea of a restoration movement or a reformation movement or anything that's causing any kind of great revival that's going on in our nation. There's no awakening that's happening right now. It doesn't appear to me. Now, I know it seemed like just a short period of time, people were saying, oh, we're seeing things on the campuses. We're seeing, young people, they seem to be, and I hear that.
Yeah.
But we're really not seeing within the churches that kind of growth again. It seems to have lost its importance. I mean, among people who are church people.
Yeah, and you don't have that fire in isolation. It just doesn't happen. So when people isolate themselves from one another, and the whole purpose of the church is to bring us together so that we encourage one another, we build one another up, and all of that. And when people begin to believe that they can be as close to God, separated from all of that, then there is no room in any of that for that kind of revival that we're talking about. We talked about this off air that in my years in ministry, this is one of the great changes that has been made. I can remember my first big church was the church of about 280 to 320 is about where we landed every week. And it was nothing for us to have 225 that night, 225 on Wednesday night, because people felt really compelled to be there. And I've heard people say over the years, well, it was all that judgment thing. They thought they were going to be judged. And
so it was more duty than it was.
Yes. But I'm telling you, it really wasn't that way. I knew these people, and these people felt a sense of dedication to what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so it became very important to them to be a part of that and to be there. And I'm going to tell you, revival happens in that sort of setting, not in this isolated setting that we've learned in these recent years.
Yeah, so we felt the real need, Brian, to talk about why it is that we actually gather as God's people. What is it that motivates us to be there? When some people find out the real reason of why we're gathering together, it seems strange to them. And I would even say some of our Christian folk, it seems strange to them. We said before that they kind of look at this as a religious gathering that we think we've got to go before God and pay a certain amount of homage to God, or He's not going to bless us, and and He's looking to curse us if He can. You know what I mean? If He can catch us off guard, or catch us doing something that we shouldn't be doing, right? It's like you can get there and you think you're going to go to heaven, but you get there and He says, now wait a minute, there was this that you did that nobody knew about. Always have this idea that God is this angry God that is looking to throw lightning bolts down and zap you at any time. And so you got to go and appease this God. You've got to go and offer a certain amount of songs to this God, and a certain amount of prayers to this God, and a certain amount of... And yet when we talk about why we gather as God's people, it isn't that. It isn't that we've got to appease this God. It's almost, Brian, that this God woos us in. And then when He gets us here in all of this, that we're going there to worship Him, He then blesses us.
That's true. As you're saying that, like we have to go and appease God, as you're saying that, it reminds me, one of my favorite cartoons back in the day was the Far Side. And one of my favorite ones...
Mine too, by the way.
He had some great stuff. And he has this picture of, and the caption was, God at his keyboard. And he's got this picture, this white-haired man in a robe, and he's sitting there looking at a guy on his computer, and he's walking under a piano, dangling by a rope. And God's got his finger over this button.
Yeah,
and the button's
yeah.
labeled Smite.
Yeah.
Like he's just waiting to push the Smite button. I'm going to drop this keyword in your smoke.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get this guy. Like this is the idea of God. But church, I guess, I mean, there's probably more reasons than we have episodes to talk about why we would do it. But, one of the reasons that I like to come to church is really because there's other people that understand what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get excited about something. You learn some new stuff. You learn things about God. You got this excitement and this zeal about the Lord, and you've maybe learned a new Bible story or some new facet of understanding that you have, and you just want to Doug, listen to this. I just learned this thing. This is the coolest. And you can go talk to somebody and they understand what you're talking about. You just can't do that at work. You just can't go to your boss, and typically, a lot of times you're just very discouraged from talking about anything that's religion or politics, or i.e. anything important. And so you just don't have any outlet for this. And I need that from people. I talk to people. This is what I do.
Yeah, and that idea of being discouraged, I think, is really important in this discussion. I mean, the world beats on us. Everything I read I read so much when I look at news that is anti-God and anti-Christian, and you watch TV, you see some of the same things on there. You go to movies and they're woke and all of that. I mean, we are just beat on, and the idea of being able to come together into a group where we have the same goal and we have the same outlook and we're looking for the same future. I mean, it makes a lot of difference. It's like Elijah. Well, there's nobody but me, and God says, "Well, wait a minute. There's a lot more than you." Imagine how discouraged he felt, thinking there was no one but him.
It's like, think of a team sport, like God has made a football team or something, and you're all alone and you've got a football and you can throw it around, but it's not like being on a team where you have, you can actually, I'm here to play the game where I need
and then
my
you may
team.
not have anybody to throw it to. So.
Yeah, that's very true. And so I really felt the need to come back and spend some more time talking about why it is that we actually go to church. I also wanted to spend a moment or two, Bill, talking about the agape feast that we had here.
Oh.
This was something new and different for us.
It was new and different.
And we've never, as far as I can remember, did it right in our church service in this setting. We've done it at campsites and things like that before, but we actually brought the idea in of taking the whole assembly time that we have together with the family of God and devoting that to our time around the Lord's Supper. And in my mind, I mean, we turned all the chairs around in here. We're all facing each other.
Yeah, it was different.
Yeah, it was completely different. Had a completely different feel about it, and it was certainly. I felt like anyway, it was certainly a blessing to me.
Yeah, I think, and it was to me too. And I know my wife liked it as well. But we so often do things in the same way, week in and week out. And we come into auditorium, everybody sits facing the same way, and they're facing the band, they're facing the speaker.
In their assigned seats.
Usually
Not really,
the
but
same
we always
seats.
pick the same seats for some reason.
Yeah. You can stand up here, and I know Doug knows, and I know just about where everybody sits. And when they move, I'll say something to them. You don't belong here. You belong over there.
That's right.
So to do something different like that, and it was, while it was not exactly what the first century church did, it was more common to what they did, because they often met in houses, and we started out as Christians in a home where we just simply sat around and we took the Lord's Supper together. We studied and did all of that sitting in a house. And so in the first century, they did a lot like that. They ate together because they came a distance to join one another, which, by the way, is important to what we're talking about.
That's right.
It was important for them to be together, and so they came in buggies and wagons and on foot, and so they would bring some food and they would eat together, and they often called that the love feast. And as they did that, they would take the Lord's Supper, and so we kind of got close to that. We had a snack.
That's right.
We had some cheese and crackers and stuff that you could pick up,
crackers,
and eat.
grapes. I think
Grapes, yeah, it was very, very nice.
Yeah.
So, and then we had some folks who talked about themselves a little bit. Nobody was asked to do that. I mean, we didn't call on people.
Right,
We didn't put anybody on the spot.
No, these knew in advance.
Yeah, these people knew in advance that they were going to talk about themselves. One man talked about the fact that he was cancer-free now. He spent a long time fighting cancer and going through a whole lot, and now things are in a, and so it was inspiring from that
really was.
standpoint. And then we took the Lord's Supper together, and we're all facing each other. And so that's not something we're going to do once a month or every week. But it's something we may do once in a while. It was fun. It was different. And I think it was a reminder of why we come together. We sit facing one another. It isn't always about just taking in what is being said or done up here on the stage. It was far more about one another. We're sitting there looking at one another now. So I thought it was fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, I did too. And it seemed to me from the folks that I talked to, now, again, I get maybe a little different perspective because when I ask people about things, they're talking to the preacher. So, sometimes they can give me a little different, a little softer, maybe, if they didn't like it as much, they're not as apt to tell me.
Yeah.
But I prefaced it, Brian, by asking questions like I would say, so today was a little different. What did you think about it? I kind of gave them an opening.
You weren't saying like, tell me how much you love the
That's right. That's right. I didn't do that. So I made it so that it was an opportunity for them to say, whether they really liked it or not. And most folks seem to say that they liked it, or at least they didn't have a problem with it.
They just, all they wanted was more bass and drums. That was all that they, no, I'm kidding.
Very amped down.
It was, that was a different thing too. 'Cause one of the things that I wish we could just have the best of all of it. But, some of that praise worship stuff really, that's something to like activate my emotion. Like I'm allowed to have emotions. I can just let that run and it's okay. Like I've done the math. You may now have emotion. It's okay to just let that happen. And so music is something that's really good. It stirs us up in movies and, it's just one of those things. And so now you're singing about the Lord and so I want that praise worship thing. But this worked too. This was a whole different thing because now what we don't usually get is what you're talking about. We were hearing people's testimonies and hearing their stories and that can get to you too. Like when Bill was telling about his cancer, like, dude, you should be dead. Why are you standing here? And it was kind of emotional. It was pretty amazing to see that.
Yeah.
So
and then we did have music.
Yeah.
We did some just a cappella singing, and we had a couple of people who played a guitar and sang, and it was very inspirational from that standpoint. So
the song that Jessica, one of our praise team, did was I mean, she has such a beautiful voice anyway, but it just moved me to tears.
Yeah,
I thought of